All right, we've got the Boogeyman live via satellite. David Gunn from King 810 and Yavid is here. David, we've been talking about doing something like this for a while. The goal and idea is to have you on relatively frequently, just talking about various topics, amongst other surprises, which we'll get to at some point that I'm excited to share. But the reason why we got you here today is to talk about ancient Rome. Kind of before the show, we were talking about the similarities between ancient Rome and America, and you said you had a funny way to think about that. Could you tell us what you meant or what you were thinking?
Yeah, when you brought it up to me, I was thinking it would be pretty corny to just spout off historical facts or whatever that everyone knows because I'm not a historian or an accomplished, scholar. And I thought there's been 100 movies, fake movies, real movies, documentaries, stuff like that about Rome, ancient Rome. There's this kind of role playing fascination with the whole thing. And I thought it would be kind of lame to kind of do a pissing contest where I'm like, I know a lot about ancient Rome and here's some factoids, like a trivia kind of thing.
Yeah.
Started what I tried to think about is guess what I try to think about with anything is how are we oriented to that time frame, or how might we look back at it, and how do we resemble it? What type of reflection is it giving back to us? So I tried to think of things like how we might be similarly oriented to
Yeah.
ancient Rome instead of just doing old stupid things. And I held the question in my head for a minute, and as I was walking around, like I said, I just had a notepad that I wrote things down with, because the first thing I thought of was kind of boring. Ancient Rome was a republic, and I was only really thinking about 100 BCE to, we'll say zero because it's funny to say year zero, but
Yeah.
when I think of ancient Rome, I think of BC. I don't know. That's probably not an official definition or anything, but I kind of homed in on that time frame. And I was thinking the first thing that popped into my mind was an interesting factoid about how the most important idea in the Roman Republic was the idea that it was a republic, because I find that is the most important idea about the American Republic, is the idea that it is a republic. And when you talk to most people these days, they think we have a democracy. They'll say it as if it is a noun, and technically, semantically, it is a noun, but democracy is kind of something you do. It's more like of a verb. It's something you practice. You know what I mean? Democratic, whatever it might be, voting, debate, whatever. But we have a republic. And not only do I have a problem with people thinking we have a democracy and ignoring the republic part of it, but I have another strange contention with, when you look up on the machine that never tells a lie, Google, uh, it tells you that a republic is a government form of government that has a constitution, and that the constitution is put into place to state basic rights for the minorities. And it's almost as if the government wrote it itself. You know what I mean? Because there is no time, whether we're talking about ancient Rome or we're talking about now, there is absolutely no time when the government is not the minority. The Every country, every land has a numerical minority. I mean, I'm not talking about the hijacked word minority that we use today about Asian, Black, Hispanic, South Pacific, whatever. I'm talking about numerical minorities.
Yeah.
There is no government that does not rule over a mass. There are maybe a couple thousand members of government in this whole country, and we have almost 350 million people. So framing the whole idea of a constitution protects minorities is kind of off. It's already a kind of crippling, destabling, off to a bad start idea, because the government's the actual minority, and it kind of takes the power away from the people. So my first thought was, well, people don't tend to think we have a they tend to think we have a democracy, not a republic. My second thought was the definition of republic is a constitution that protects minorities, which is wrong because it, it takes the power away from a people entirely. So that was kind of my first thought, and I thought that was pretty much enough of the boring stuff to get out of the way. I thought that was the misleading propaganda of the day, and
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, well, David, you've even shared that video where it has all of the news heads, the media heads talking, and they keep saying, "This is a threat to our democracy," and it's 100 of them saying it, and it's insane. When I was on city council, I would have people who tell me, "You got to do what the majority of the people want," and I would always flip it depending on who I was talking to. If I was talking to a conservative, I could say, "What if it's an abortion clinic?" And then they say, or if it's a liberal, what if it's a anti-abortion clinic or whatever, it's they only want mob rule when it's in their favor, you know.
yeah, and when they say they stand for the people, they mean the people that agree with them, because you can see this in modern politics where we almost seen in the past 2 years a flop from conservatism to liberalism on very essential fundamental issues. And would you ever have thought that the liberal, democratic left wing, whatever you want to call them, would be defending and shilling the big pharmaceutical industry? If you would have heard that 10 years ago, you would have probably laughed and thought that no, big business and big pharma is a conservative institution, big capitalism, the invisible hand of the market, the capitalistic god that the conservatives worship. There's no way that a Democrat's going to go out and get a Fauci tattoo, but here we are.
Yeah, you talk about that
Fauci for life.
I wasn't even
That's the
meaning to bring
tattoo
up
on the neck.
wasn't even trying to bring up music into it. I was just talking about Rome, but that's what I like in that song 2A is you point that out, and I just don't see other people framing it like that. Like drugs are bad. Weed now good. It's just what you're talking about right there.
Yeah. So that was kind of the first thing I thought was the idea that people think we have a democracy, the idea that not too many people are familiar with a republic, the idea that the way a republic is defined is kind of disempowering or disheartening. Yeah. And then I kind of started to, like I said, that was all the uninteresting parts. The things I started to look at after that was how something that we revere as, when we think of ancient Rome, we think of integrity and honor and legacy and all these things.
Yeah.
But I like to think of how things parallel with today with the same way they did back then. And there are a lot of really strange parallels. The way the Roman army used to invade and overthrow all different places. Northern Africa, we're there or coming there soon. Egypt, obviously, and all these countries, Spain. And they put these client kings in, which we would just call it today a kind of sponsored coup. And they would have these client king rulers who kind of followed the lead of the Roman Empire. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like something, that's going on today. So I try to think of these types of examples. The old saying, all roads lead to Rome. And that was all roads full of treasure, art, slaves, everything taken by military conquest. And all roads led to Rome because that's where everything was being taken. And all roads lead to Rome sounds like America today. We have an influx and a flooding of the country, and all roads really do lead here, even if you're not, on the actual road. If you think about the Silicon Road, all conversations are centered around this country, and everyone is kind of wavering, following behind. And I thought that was another pretty cool commonality, that there's a promised dream that inspires a lot of war right now in Eastern Europe. There's a promised dream. All you hear on the news is, will Ukraine join NATO and all these other things? We have a European Union. We have this old North American treaty that is completely outdated, that for some reasons is still ruling the world, and people are falling in lockstep over this idea of the American dream. I thought that was pretty strange.
When you're traveling the world, what's your sense? Do you have a sense that it feels like all roads lead to America? Is that how people take? Because I've started to feel like maybe people in other countries actually resent us quite a bit. Do you feel like that, or?
Yes. Yeah. Luckily, I don't have that entire perspective because I go to really poor places. So that's true in Europe. So Nietzsche had this great quote that says Darwin was it's not exact, but Darwin was completely correct. ... about life in Europe or life in England. It's just a hilarious quote. That's how I feel about that statement. Everyone has their ridicule, their hatred, their disdain for Americans.
Yeah.
In Europe. Try to go to Africa, or try to go to a slum in Calcutta, try to go to Cairo, or try to go to somewhere go to the Congolese people, or in Western Africa, or I'm positive if you go to half of Southeast Asia, you're not going to hear that type of rhetoric. You know what I mean?
Really?
No. Are you kidding me? They mix water with dirt and eat and call it mud cakes.
They do?
No one is going to be upset about American values when they're eating mud in Haiti.
Have you been to Rome, by the way?
No, actually, no. I had a trip to go there, and then the big C-19 happened.
Okay. Yeah, ruined a lot of things.
In what you were studying, comparing it to America, trying to think of where to go with it. What about the personalities involved? I've read a little bit on Julius Caesar. I don't know how much you know about him. Was he a threat to the Republic? Is that what the problem was? They didn't want a tyrant. They were trying to preserve, the Republic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, after he defeated Gaul, he brought in the Gauls, and he was filling the Senate with people that weren't even from Rome. I mean, that was one of the reasons. Yeah. And they were like, it's like the same thing the Democrats do.
Well, where they
bring in they're like, come on over. And then we're like, what's happening? They need votes. So that's what Julius Caesar was doing.
The replacement theory. But it makes, all the replacement theory is I need people in my area who are more likely to do what I want, who are going to vote for the things I want them to vote for. So therefore I need to get these people in my area, right? That's pretty much what it is. Yeah. So basically Julius Caesar was the original.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, there's a bunch of debate because all intellectuals do is debate. But I think it's fair to say that the fall of Rome happened as a result of Julius Caesar. I don't think that's too crazy or too strange to say. The Republic was being played with, if you want to talk about modern parallels, in the election before Caesar, I believe it was. It could have been or just around the area. There was a lot of, this is again what I was trying to focus on for modern day topics, was election fraud. Surprisingly enough, there was great election fraud in ancient Rome. There was a lot of crony capitalism. There were two main sides to the ancient Roman government, and there was a lot of lobbying, a lot of bribery, a lot of what we would call gerrymandering. These concepts were all commonplace, and the big business and the ultra rich received bailouts from the government. There was election denial. There was election fraud. There was, I believe it was around 60. That's where most people say that Rome, the empire, began to kind of fall away. And plenty of people, just like today, there are plenty of people were glad to put Rome in the hands of Caesar. as a dictator. There were many people upset when Caesar died. It was not something where Caesar ruled with an iron fist. 50% of the population wanted to be ruled just like they do today, and that's another commonality.
Yes.
Yeah, and he would come back from, or he wouldn't even come back from battle, but he would, after he did a conquering, he would just send, people back to throw the spoils to him.
Unbelievable amounts of wealth.
Yeah.
We talk about them as if they were just plebs running around in robes. They had money we do not even have today. These people that we know of have money of something like a sultan or an oil. People like Bill Gates and Elon Musk, they don't have the type of money that the people we're talking about have today. For example, I think it was it Crassus or was it Caius? I can't remember, but these people had fortunes of, upwards of what would be today $50 billion. They talk of hundreds of thousands of sesterces or 1,000 talents. 1,000 talents was a common debt that the Caesar had. This was billions of dollars. And this was a common debt he carried around. So the way we think about things today, like very self-centered and egotistical, they had this same thing going on back then. One of the greatest generals, I believe, in the time of Caesar was Crassus, and he was the richest Roman. And when Caesar was running for office, they were buying votes left and right. And it was a business of buying votes. We don't admit that it's a business of buying votes today, but we just call it lobbying and stuff like that. But they turned existing businesses into buying facilities, and they had intermediaries, and they had people who held money until the votes were actually delivered. They didn't have computers, obviously. They weren't running the Dominion, but this was all very public, and it wasn't scandalous.
Herod the Great, from when Jesus was born, that dude, he paid Rome to be put in charge of Jerusalem, of Israel. Basically the king of it. It's like, hey, here's the money. He had tremendous amounts of wealth too.
Yeah.
Like, all right, cool.
And power, military power as well. If you can be a rich state, but if you have a weak military, you're just going to get, and the same thing is true today, right? You're just going to get overlorded by us or China or, another country. There's a reason why the Chinese have essentially an army around the Congo while children crawl into the earth digging out lithium and cobalt with their bare hands with children on their back, to sell, to make their chips, what we're talking on right now, what the phone calls that we make, the things we use to record. And America did the same thing. We pulled out, or they say we pulled our mine out of the Congo, but I don't really know. It must be just under a different name, but it's the same thing. Countries need protecting, and they employed the power of the Roman military back in the day because they could protect you, just like a certain country right now employs our budget and our military weapons to protect them.
Yeah.
What country is that?
He's talking about Ukraine.
Oh, yeah. I know. I just wanted it to be said.
That one. Yeah, that may have went over a couple people's heads. But
dude, when I really got into ancient Rome and was reading about it and watching stuff about it, it was what was fascinating to me and kind of just I thought about was that Julius Caesar, he built up his army, he got everyone loyal, he came in, and then he just declared himself a god.
Yeah.
And then after him, Caesar Augustus, he referred to himself as the son of God. And so it was like a mingling of politics and religion. And it's just fascinating because I was like, well, man, what if the Antichrist, like dress rehearsals. Like throughout time, he's tried to take over. Julius Caesar, Hitler, stuff like that. And then right in the middle of like, the Son of God, who is was the first Roman emperor actually declared. Then Jesus is born. Like there's like boom, and then it screws up everything.
Yeah, that's
and I mean that's kind of, it's just the whole that whole time period is so incredibly fascinating because there's so many major characters that lived in that time period. It's nuts to think about. Like if you really, once you start reading it, all like Cleopatra, Mark Antony, like all these people that are notorious, they all lived around, like their lives overlapped each other.
Yeah, Seneca, Nero, Marcus Aurelius. That's what makes Seneca like such an interesting philosopher, for instance, because he had to live that worldview, because he was supposedly, and David or Austin, either one of you can check me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that when Nero took over, it was actually relatively good for the first few years because Seneca was actually running Rome. But and Nero was basically in the background partying and just being a degenerate. And it wasn't until his friends kind of gassed him up and said, you should be making these decisions, not him. That's when things kind of changed. Have you guys ever heard that before? Or?
I have not.
I haven't heard that exactly, but my thinking about that, just to parallel it with modern day, is a great empire takes a long time to fall. It doesn't fall overnight. So I would say that could probably be true either way you cut it, whether his friends were there or not. He couldn't have destroyed Rome overnight anyway, and he didn't. People say that, just like people say that the coming of the Caesar of Julius is the beginning of the unraveling or the fall of Rome. People actually credit Nero with destroying Rome, and
I think as Rome, this is just just another theory that I thought about when reading is, as it was like beginning to fall, and everything was falling apart. It's like, all right, how do you get control? Maybe they were thinking, and then Constantine comes along and adopts Christianity as the religion of the state of Rome. And so then you have the mingling, what Julius Caesar started, of, church and state. And it's almost as if like people, like they knew, because I think like emperors and people that really run the world, they don't just think about what they want to accomplish in their lifetime. They're thinking about, for generations upon generations. So it's almost like they rolled the Roman Empire into the Roman Catholic Church. And Rome is still very much alive. And then they took over the entire world with churches. We have like citizens of Rome everywhere. I live in a town of 50 people. There is a Catholic church dead center of my town that I don't even know who goes there. I mean, there's people there sometimes, but it's just like in my town, it's abandoned. There's no downtown. There is nothing but a Catholic church. And then 9 miles away, another one. 9 miles away, another one. But it's like that all over the world.
Yeah. I never thought about that.
Yeah. Well, it's a humongous business, but a lot of that goes back to, this is getting off topic a little bit, but I believe it was Mary. There's just because I'm a fan of the non-canonical books, Mary was Jesus' best disciple. And she was the one that had the plug basically into women. And she was the one doing the spreading of the messages. And I think it was Paul who was really jealous of Mary. And they did this by invading households, but women kind of held the household together in those days. And if you had the women, you kind of had the ear of the masses. It was much like
like
today.
that with Motley Crue. They said that's how they popped off in L.A. was they had all the chicks first, and then the dudes showed up.
But whatever the women do, the dudes follow. And this was a big Christianic trick. it's no coincidence that the biggest rock star around this historical period was Dionysus. And it's not strange that Dionysus has long, androgynous brown hair. It's not strange that he's the wine god and Christ's first miracle is turning water to wine. It's not strange that all these things align with the Christ. And, the women around this time seem to be comfortable with taking their belief of Dionysus and kind of setting the Jesus figure right on top of it, and it propagated. The church, aside from war, crusades and things, it did the best PR campaign you could probably do. A lot of people say, the Christian idea is the best idea. That's why it survived, but it survived under the knife. It didn't survive through happenstance. The world didn't get hit with a deluge and then the Bible emerged. It survived by force and by a lot of money. I've been to these places like the Temple of Demeter. It's completely defaced, and then they throw a cross up. I've joked about it in the past that the Christian gang was just throwing their setup everywhere, all over Rome, all over Greece. They go in, they take the temple, they hijack it, and they put up the cross, and now it's a Christian and the establishment or church or center for worship. But we all know it was an Ashtoreth temple or a Demeter or an Osiris or thousands of years before that. But yeah, that was getting a little bit off topic, but
no, it's all right. That would actually be an interesting discussion too, because I've been reading kind of contrarian history towards the Crusades, of kind of flipping it, because in the public schools, it's more about saying that it was all a Christian offensive, and so I enjoy, reading the other side to that of kind of what sparked it and stuff. That would be a good conversation.
Man, I've read a book about how the Knights Templar was basically, they were setting up the first bank. They worked for the Vatican, and they brought money in there.
Yeah.
And like when countries were about to fall, you would call them, they would come and take your money to the Vatican bank where it would be safe.
And also it would be usable from town to town. So if you have raiders and marauders in separate cities around the world, this was almost the first digital currency, I guess. The Knights, when you banked with the Knights, you could use your currency because it was backed from town to town without carrying it. So you're not carrying a wagon or whatever it might be. You might be carrying it on your person. You might be carrying your gold or whatever your pieces might be from town to town. With the Knights, their big thing was, this is backed and this exists here, and your money with us is good from city to city, from state to state, whatever you want to do. And again, that's a little bit off topic, but yeah, my main point was just the PR campaign that it does, take the Crusades out and take the violence out. It's the same with, you see this today in the Christian church. It's a bit maddening. It accepts everything and stands for nothing. It's willing to, it's so desperate for members, followers. It will do it'll almost go against its own beliefs just to get more people in. And the Dalai Lama does this too. The Dalai Lama will never have a single problem with anyone, the way that anyone is living or the thing that anyone's doing, even if it goes exact opposite against everything that he teaches in his religion. The Catholic Church does this too. So
yeah, he'll be like, how do I know? I just live in a cave on a mountain.
I just read a book called The Masculinity of Christ, and when I read it, it made my chest hair grow. But it was kind of awesome because it pointed out how, like with what David said, I don't consider those churches. Like if you go, like if you are a quote unquote church, but you preach against the Bible, to me, that's no church. But yeah, like you said, David, there's people who just want that relevance. And so to reel us back into Rome here for a second, thinking about the parallels maybe between America and Rome, One thing that's been maybe a bit of a theory of mine, but it seems like in general when empires collapse, but especially with Rome, there was this hyper fixation on sex. And I think it's weird how people have like they put their identity in their sexual orientation, whatever that may be. Like I used to say like, I wouldn't walk around and be like, "What's up? I'm Matty Ice, the MILF hunter." Like I wouldn't identify myself by like what I'm attracted to sexually. You know what I mean? And so I feel like it's Rome was the same thing. It just seems like the artwork, everything was hypersexualized. I there's those pictures.
Yeah, no matter what they drew, they're like, let's put a penis on it.
Yeah, like wind chimes, all that stuff.
Wind chimes were shaped as penises,
Yeah.
and the little bell was in the bottom of the head. And they jiggled.
Well, there were a few, even in ancient times, a few dandies, I guess you would call them. And this is kind of funny because they were kind of like the punk rockers. It's strange to read, and it goes right back to the thing that we've been talking about since the beginning. These guys dressed funny. They talked funny. They were often rich and aristocrat type of caste. They were very well off. But there's a funny quote. I think it's by Plutarch, and he says that a man named Claudius is a what we would call trans today. So he's a cross dresser. He's a party animal. He's doing everything. And he said Claudius was very highfalutin. This is not a quote, but he had the tongue of the plebes. So he talked almost like you could imagine someone talking urban slang, rich white kids from the Lower East Side talking, or LA or whatever you might have, middle upper class or upper class trying to be cool with the hip hop culture. This was Claudius, and he was into the cross dressing, he was into the partying, and he was doing all these things. And this was still around the time of this Julius in 100 to BC, 60, 70, I think it was 80 around then. But there were punk rockers then, and they were reformers. They were kind of like reformers, always trying to do the thing, pretty much the same things that they tried to do today. This is where we get the term rabble rousing. It has an origin here. And one thing for sure about going back to the masculinity of Christ and making your chest hair grow, there was an opposition, though, of manliness in Rome. These Claudius figures, they didn't like, they thought it was an invasion of Greece. They thought this is feminine. This is sophistry. This is talk and intellect. This is plays, actors, celebrities, scholars. Think of Hollywood or LA today.
Yeah.
They had these same problems, scholarly education. They thought this was corrupting the Roman man and the Roman people and the Roman ways as they saw them. They saw it as a hoity-toity, feminine, full of themselves, very much like we know people feel today about certain industries, say like Hollywood or something like this. And imagine a military man and sitting side by side with a theater actor in the LGB or whatever community. This is kind of was a standoff in Rome, even in BC. They had these same issues.
Yeah.
So if that makes you feel any better, this isn't new or strange. And Rome did not fall for hundreds more years. Again, yeah. I use this as a serious
So do you think it became like they were just so comfortable that when you have that much wealth, you just essentially look for pleasure after pleasure? Is that where that comes from?
Yeah, I think today and back then. Yeah, these were all very rich people. The people out here, fighting the good fight, the social justice front, they're not really going to work in the coal mines.
Yeah.
They have a little spare time. A lot of them go to Starbucks and get $7 drinks, and they probably spend a lot of time at home on the computer or on Twitter or on their phone. They probably don't like their husbands, but you got to have time to do this stuff. When you're working, like I said, when you asked about the disdain for Americans, and I said I don't find it in Africa. This is a very big first world problem. And Rome was a very, very, very rich empire by the time Nero came around, and Nero inherited all of these spoils that he didn't necessarily earn.
Yeah. That's why he was like, burn it, light it on fire, let me watch it and play the fiddle.
Exactly. It meant nothing to him because he didn't earn it. And that is how things used to be in the government and in the Roman army. You used to not be able to fight unless you owned a farm or better. The army was made of landowners or better. The army wasn't made of the poor. Yeah. And with this, generals built up their own armies. And when generals built up their own armies, civil wars started. Yeah. And that's when the republic began to crumble. But the difference is these days, landowners aren't the ones that make up our military. You used to have something to come home to or something to be fighting for was the idea. Yeah. And years
now they're fighting for apartments.
Right, exactly. You had to have something to defend and you had to have something to get back to. So you were not going to, be dilly-dallying about on the battlefield when you had something to lose. And it's a bit different today. Now the land and everything is kind of went upward, and it's often the poor that make up the militaries. So that's a little bit different. But they were fighting these battles even back then. There was a dispute of reformers and stuff trying to say, well, you can come fight for me. Or like when Caesar defeated the Gauls, Caesar was notoriously, what would that be called? Not empathetic, but he forgave a lot of people. Yeah. He was not after bloodlusting. His revenge was to forgive you.
Yeah, and then he would want you to come back into the fold.
Bring you into
I mean, that's how Brutus, he brought him back in, and then he stabbed him. Bad call, Julia.
Is there people do this all the time, Julius. And it's a little bit corny, but is there an American figure that we could look at as a modern day Julius Caesar, or is there anybody who strikes you as having similar parallels or no? I used to hear people all the time say Obama was Nero. Like people have always said crap.
No,
like that,
because Obama wasn't walking through the White House garden with Human Torches.
Yeah.
That's kind of what people respond to if you say the modern day version of stuff. You can always point to some fickle little detail that'll kind of make everyone shrug it off. I wouldn't say Obama was the Nero. I think if you're talking about Nero, someone that did horrible damage to the Republic.
I was going to say George Bush.
I was going to say Kissinger.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Kissinger, who, my God, has anyone wrote more material about their own lives than that man? He has like 15 books. They're like this thick.
Yeah.
And they're just him talking about himself. Yeah. It's nuts.
Yeah, that's pathetic. I believe Obama has multiple.
He does.
But the Kissinger selection, I was just baffled when I was at the bookstore once, and I'm flipping through it. I'm like, this is insane. Yeah.
I want to get to the Kissinger's thing, but the reason why I said George Bush real quick was because the whole Iraq war has pissed off a lot of people, and it's weird how many people have looked back and were like, man, I was a supporter of that, but now when I look back, I don't. And I think there's something to be said about what all that did to destabilizing all of the other countries and ours in general. But yeah, so
why did you choose Kissinger?
Yeah. Why Kissinger?
Because I got real riled up.
There's a couple things. Besides, I don't know if this could be a whole separate conversation we might want to table, but he's done more to destroy the country than almost anyone.
Give us like a a teaser cliffhanger, and then when we'll have you back on, and then we'll talk about that.
Austin hates Kissinger. He saw I had some Kissinger books, and he was ready to fight that guy right there.
I really just want to leave you hanging and say we need to talk about it entirely separately, because I'll fly off the handle.
All right, sweet. This is what I like. We'll take turns.
I want to keep it in a little bit focused, because you said, is there anyone like the Caesar? And I would say no, there isn't alive, because you can't be. There's so much compartmentalized. Like I said, politicians are career politicians. Generals or military people, to get to a general, especially one like that, you're going to be a career military person. Yeah. So this was a lot different. He would be a general out there warring, come back and run for office and be elected. You can say that there are similar things like that these days, but there's really nothing to this kind of degree. But I will say something I was thinking about when I was thinking of the modern parallels, was that, speaking of the Caesar, he was thrown into a river, and most leaders, he was highly polarizing, whichever way you look at him, and he still is today. And I can think of a few people today that are highly polarizing, and most of them went peacefully into their grave, but on occasion they were so controversial that a burial was not even to be had for them. And they wouldn't put him in the ground, because if they did bury him, they would just come back later and have to rob the grave and destroy it and make sure there was no place for followers to gather, no place to sacrifice, no place to worship over, no place for people to pilgrimage to. And instead they throw him in the river. And just to segue to some of the stuff that you were talking to me, they did the same with Hitler. The Soviets had Hitler's body, and I believe they convened with a few different countries, and I cannot believe that ours wasn't one of them, that said, you need to get rid of that thing.
Yeah, they probably taxidermied it, and it's in Kissinger's family room.
It's probably in Kissinger's bed, but did the same thing with Alexander. Alexander's body supposedly came up missing, and they'll probably do the same with some of the world leaders today without saying their names. But the point is that you see this same thing today. It's almost like a cancellation, what we call canceling today, right? So even back then they were canceling people, and today we tear down statues of our past leaders, or we deface monuments, right? People that don't fall in favor of the things that we believe today when we look into the past with our modern moral lens. But there was a leader back then called Sulla, and Sulla was he was one of the greatest generals. And he was the first one, I believe, that I recall anyway, to say, when I die, I want to be cremated. So none of my bones, my skull, my head won't be on a pike. My bones are not going to be used by revenge for my enemies. You're not going to use my dead body to make a statement for any other purpose but my own. And even after I die, I'm going to be dead, and that's going to be it. And I feel like that just rings so true with today's kind of nihilistic, atheistic day and age, where we're not too obsessed with legacy. Legacy's kind of shunned, and reputation is embraced and worshipped. And it could be a subconscious thing, but it's interesting to think about the atheistic cremation idea. And to me, I call it an atheistic cremation idea because you're burning. And it could be a consequence of some type of subconscious, poorly lived life, or an accumulation of enemies, or a lack of accountability, or even just a pessimistic, nihilistic lack of legacy. I'm kind of just making it up as I go. But when you think about defaming and arresting and persecuting officials after they leave office, they did that too. So even if you weren't dead, if you did die and you were controversial, they made sure your followers had no way to remember you. And that, today sounds like, the cancellation or the real-time edit of Wikipedia, or when you read things, this misinformation, disinformation, or whatever, they're writing historical things in real time. And back then, if you participated in government, one thing about Rome that is not the same as it is today, although they do make exceptions, and they're making an exception right now with the Mueller investigation, the Durham investigation, and now some indictments on Trump.
Yeah.
This is a parallel that made me think of ancient Rome, because you couldn't persecute, you couldn't kill, you couldn't sue members of government when they were actively in government. And this meant that a lot of Romans tried to stay in government for as long as possible, because when they got out, they would be slapped with a bunch of lawsuits or killed. Wow. So they would serve as many times as they could. They would serve. And today, because the second they were out of office, they were going to be charged or imprisoned or killed or whatever. But today, now in real time, there's a government trying to charge a president that hasn't been president in 3 years, 7 years of fruitless investigation based on vendettas, millions of our dollars spent. We're spending millions of dollars doing investigation after investigation, and nothing seems to come of it. And that kind of reminded me of that with the cancellation, with the reputation destroying, tearing down of statues, defacing monuments, banned images. Even Julius Caesar banned, I think Marius, maybe Cinna. I think Julius had some banned images of past leaders. And
yeah, no, that's fascinating.
Still weird, and it's still going on.
Yeah, and the precedents that get set with this, it's like, speaking of modern times, they censored Adam Schiff, and then they were going to fine him, and it's like, look, like David had said, yeah, we've spent millions of dollars on there, but I don't really want to set a precedent where now we can make these, where you can sue your political rivals or make them pay up like that. Like, in one hand, I do like it, but trust me, the pendulum, you always have to think, whatever your political side is, if whatever you use against the opponent's coming back and doing it to you. Same thing in jiu-jitsu last night. Yeah,
you opened that door.
In jiu-jitsu last night while I was sparring, they said, yeah, you can punch somebody, but however hard you punch, you need to be ready to get punched that hard back.
Right.
So same thing in the political sense. And speaking of, like Nero had Seneca killed. Like, Seneca was out in the countryside, had nothing to do with government anymore. He was out of the way, and he knew that one day his time would come. And sure enough, the soldiers showed up. And
but Seneca went out on his own terms, though.
Yes. Yep.
Not like a man laying in a bathtub, slashing his wrists open, and laying there without a single wince.
Yep. Yeah. He knew it was coming. He reflected on that for a long time. It sounded like, he knew it was coming. He knew what time it was.
He knew it when he took up the position of what was his position to Nero?
Accountant.
Yes.
Or whatever. Mentor.
Mentor, some type of mentor. They called it something else, but I can't remember.
So, if you want to draw more parallels to ancient Roman America, you can. But we had mentioned Hitler a couple minutes ago, and that was one of the things that Austin has found to be interesting, is the parallels between Nazi Germany and ancient Rome, in the sense that Nazi Germany using some of ancient Rome's symbols and stuff like that. I guess that's not something I ever noticed, so I have really no wisdom or knowledge in this, so I was gonna kind of let Austin talk on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just noticed that, and it came from watching the Rome series on HBO, which I think is fantastic. And when Julius Caesar basically returns and then presents himself to the people as like a god, and just with all the eagles, the red, just a lot of symbolism was the same, and just the way that how it was everywhere, like the flags and the I mean you couldn't walk a block without a symbol of some sort.
Yeah, the pillars, all the Greek and Roman, or the Greco-Roman, or whatever you want to call it. I've actually been to, I can't remember because we're talking about it, but started to build a pretty massive airport that never got finished, and or maybe it was finished and they just kind of discontinued the use. But yeah, you could definitely see his inspiration. The thing that I was thinking about with Hitler was in ancient Rome, you probably seen this in the special, every famous, by famous I mean acclaimed general, sought a triumph, what they used to call a triumph, which was a great parade.
Yeah. Yeah. They all wanted the parade.
For the most revered people. And whenever I thought of the triumph, I thought of Hitler was obsessed with them. If you look, all you hear is about, how Hitler could stand poised in the back of a car doing a salute for 6 hours while they drove the car, 150 miles around.
Yeah, he's just peeing his pants because he just needs the love.
Because he needs to feel warm. Yeah. And then he was obsessed with these, what the Romans called triumphs. And it reminded me of Rome, the generals. There was one called Pompey, and Pompey was one of these humongous characters in Rome. The kings of Egypt were his clients. He discovered 40 cities, killed and captured and defeated over 12 million people, right? Hitler said to have killed 6 million Jews. This guy doubled it, took over 1,500 towns or cities or settlements. We can't even take one city today. The minute we leave, it gets taken back. Yeah. Put this in perspective. This guy was the general of generals, and his wealth is equivalent to the hundreds of billions. This guy had hundreds of billions of dollars, and his triumph was 2 days long. And this was a 2-day long parade. And again, looking into history and looking now, I think of today's parades and the reasons we have parades. And they seem kind of pitiful, don't they?
I hate parades. It's so hot, and they're just throwing like melted candy at you.
It's always the shitty candy.
And now they don't even let you throw, like around here, like at parades, you can't even throw it because it might injure a child. So they have to walk and just lay it on the concrete.
I don't know.
And I'm like, what are like?
I have not been to a parade
in Wahoo.
I didn't notice. I haven't seen that. That's hilarious.
That is real. And then the whole fire department's there. Like if a house burns down, you're done, dude. You're done.
Yeah. So that was the one thing that came to mind, was the obsession with parades and these public events, that the Roman triumph kind of parallel with Hitler.
Yeah.
That was my main thinking about all that came to mind, because there is a lot of imagery and things, and he was a fan of a bunch of things, but I tend to not put too much weight into. I'm trying to think how to put this. When someone has every resource in the world at their disposal, and you talk about the building of an airport or a base or Nuremberg or whatever you might want to say, if all of it boils down to just saying a few sentences, I tend not to place too much emphasis on how obsessed he was with those ideas. It's clear that he was obsessed with them. He hijacked the swastika. He hijacked a bunch of symbolism. I don't know what the first appearance of the swastika is. I would guess that it was in Asia somewhere.
I had read a book about it once, and it was all over the world. And I think that it's even like the way that the constellations go.
Yeah, there's a Catholic church who has the swastika in a town that we're by. I don't know if it's the same, if it's facing the same way, but it was like it is. I think it is. It was a relatively common symbol.
And Hitler was an artist, so he was probably with him and his like a board meeting, And then he was like, I like this. Let's use the swastika. Let's use the eagle. Like he was like picking like artists. We take and pick stuff from everything. And that's what Hitler was doing. He probably had like a whiteboard.
Yeah, I don't think he was probably, he was able to recognize what looked dope and was able to go with that, right?
Yeah, he's just
That's like Lemmy Kilmister used to always collect Nazi stuff, and they're like, "Whoa, you Nazi?" And he's like, "No, man, it just looks cool." And it's like, hey, we have to be out like the color schemes and stuff like that. Like he did have amazing artists on his team. Go ahead, David. You were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's strange how you can hijack an image, but I feel like that might be a whole separate conversation in itself as well. Because I find that, just to leave you with a cliffhanger, today, if you search the word Venus, you come up with a female clothing line.
Every car is named after a Greek god. And Rome took their gods from Greece.
Yeah. So it's a bit depressing, when you're driving around with a shitty car called a Mazda, and that it's the man in the sun, the Ahura Mazda from the Zoroastrianism, like you kind of get put off a bit.
And I don't even know, like there probably aren't very many people that realize that Nike is also a god, a Roman god, a Greek god.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know it's Greek or Roman or whatever.
Greek, and then the Romans were like, we'll take that one.
Yeah. That type of stuff is strange, but it's really weird when you're searching for these things on the all-knowing Google, and you're getting car dealers and women's clothing and stuff, and you're searching for either a Roman goddess, or you're searching, they even name planets after these things. So you just, it's just weird.
It is weird.
Yeah, kind of like how black metal is taking the cross upside down, and they think it's like this really awesome anti-Christian thing, but upside down crosses were a symbol in Christianity for years because there's plenty of saints who were crucified like that.
Like Peter.
Yeah, more so than upright, actually. Yeah.
Kind of speaking along the lines of symbolism, Austin and I were talking on the phone a few weeks ago, and he was saying he had asked me if I've ever really looked into how, maybe in like Rome, if they needed to make a decision and they went outside and they saw a fox or something, it like meant something to them. Like, oh, I know which way to make this decision now. Like how much stock they put in to symbolism and nature
omens.
and omens. I don't really know a whole lot about, I guess, Roman omens. So I was going to leave that up to Austin to kind of talk about that. And I figured that David would definitely have, some ideas or thoughts on that too.
I mean, I just read about it. Yeah. How they would, like, if they needed to make a decision or something, they would go out into nature for a couple days or however long, and then see like an eagle fly, and they'd be like, I will do something. I don't know. Like they just went out, like whatever it told them to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. They seem to be a lot more in tune with nature. Obviously you have to be, right, when you don't have a screen flashing in your face all day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You can't watch motivational videos on how to become rich in ancient Rome. So they had to go outside and go look for the snake.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that it made me think of, again, I have had 100 things that came to mind, but I didn't want to spout off factoids just to repeat myself, but they used it in a funny way, just like we use it in a funny way today. I'll just give the funny thing that came to mind was, I believe it was Crackus. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Many leaders did this. There would be a lightning strike. There had to be a democratic election, debate, whatever it might be. If lightning strike, if the wind blew too hard, if the rain blowed, if it rained or the wind blowed or whatever it might be, leaders would use this as an excuse that it's a bad omen and we can't hold an election on today. And they would use it to stay into power for years. So these bad omens would keep power hungry leaders to stay in power, and not even into power, but into government. Like we talked earlier about how they didn't want to come out of government because they'd be harmed if they did something wrong. And I thought of what it made me think of, just hilarious. Another modern day take is a bad omen that changed something that we were going to do politically recently. Was I was reading about how Joe Biden decided not to declassify the JFK files because of COVID-19.
What?
Oh,
what?
Yeah.
What does that have to do with it?
It's a real ancient Roman omen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He saw the omens, Matt. You have to recognize that he saw the omens.
And then because he didn't do it, that's why it went away. It had nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah.
It was that decision.
And now it's gone. And yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. I know it doesn't have anything to do with the actual ask, but I was thinking Joe Biden maybe saw some omens when he didn't release the JFK files now.
Yeah, Joe Biden's seeing a lot of shit at that age.
I think he actually might speak in omens. That's why we mere plebs do not understand.
You know, David was the first person I've ever heard who was like, Joe Biden does not have a speech impediment. He's old and he's got, a problem with his brain. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I've never heard anybody ever say he had a speech impediment. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's documents from 30 years ago that I've never seen, but of writings or anything.
Bro, he's tired. He's about to die. It's not even the White House. It's the White Hospice.
Yeah.
He's just in there.
That's the White Hospice. That's like a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they tried to push that kind of, but I don't think, the mainstream media kind of threw it out there. Like, he's always had a speech impediment, but everyone knew that was a lie. And it was just some more propaganda because it was the victim thing. If you make yourself look like you can't talk, who can really criticize your foreign wars or, the fact that you pulled out of a 20-year war just to get into one more expensive one 3 months later.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking about this, David, when you're trying to make a decision, and I'm not trying to be funny right now, but this might come across as funny, but like, have you ever tried to take that, like the ancient approach? Like, I'm going to just go outside and see if something speaks to me. Have you ever tried to tap into, and I'm talking specifically Rome here, any of that ancient idea or wisdom?
Yeah. Well, that's the only way I operate. I do a bunch of things. Typically, for the most part, I have a pretty intuitive, and here's a great phrase for you: an intuitive intuition. That's what I was going to say. I typically get impulses that I follow. I don't do a lot of second guessing, and I don't do a lot of that, but I do a lot of contemplating and inward, nothing profound, meditation, inward reflection, perceived bodily rhythms, paying attention to the world around me, introspection, outrospection, some sort of consulting, that I do in dreams and stuff like that. There's a handful of, perhaps that's again for a different time, but I have a handful of really good books. Not to recommend books like they're the answer, because they aren't, but one comes to mind called The Committee of Sleep. I think it's called The Committee of Sleep or The Committee of Dreams. And this isn't even the best one, but I try to work on things in my dreams a lot while I sleep. I don't tend to do well with deadlines, which is why I'm in the world's shittiest band. I tend to just be on my own. If someone tells me, I need to have something by a certain time, if I do have it by the time, it wasn't because they told me so. It just happened. I try to be in nature as much as possible, which is why I'm a failure on social media. I try to pay attention to the world, although my primary impulse is that the world is, something tells me when the Romans or the Greeks or even any civilization, the Egyptian, or even before that, paying attention to nature and the world, there wasn't so much noise.
Yeah, man, it hits you up. Like I had to get rid of all the like just LinkedIn, the social media, all off my phone because I can't get that many notifications. I just can't. It's like a note, like I'm receiving messages like 12 different ways. And it's just like, I need it all like an email, man. I got
Yeah.
text, phone calls, Messenger, Instagram, all this stuff. It's madness.
Yeah, or alerts. You said you're receiving messages.
Oh yeah. Like, yeah, the notification pop up. Yeah.
Yeah, for nothing. They just tell you that something else happened. This could be another conversation that we might want to talk about. Marshall McLuhan and Neil Postman about pseudo events. But yeah, I don't have any alerts on my devices. I usually don't carry it. It can't summon me. The ringer's not on.
Yeah.
It has no way to summon me. So
Yeah, David's not the easiest person to text.
sometimes if I don't reply for a few months, it just means it's not time to talk.
I admire that.
It doesn't really do well for other people's lives, but it seems to do okay for mine.
That's what I want. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the goal, honestly.
Peace.
Yeah, 100% to not have access all the time. David, from the notes that you've taken and stuff like that, I mean, was there anything that you wanted to get off your chest here too that you were thinking of while we're on the topic of ancient Rome in general, or?
I thought something was really funny that I wrote down because I didn't know it, and when I was reading back through, I can't remember what I was reading. I think it might have been Plutarch or in the Lives. I can't remember exactly where.
Yeah.
But and this is just me. I didn't write too much about this, so I could be wrong, and probably someone will just be talking about how it's way off. But there was a funny senator named Cato. Cato was, I think, the most respected enemy of Julius Caesar, maybe the most respected senator of Julius Caesar's time, and super morally conservative. He hated Egypt, which most Romans did. They conquered Egypt and it hurts my heart to say this, but Egypt wasn't Egypt that we know of.
Yeah.
Around ancient Rome, and they were the Ptolemies. So this was not like Ramses and shit, Egyptian stuff. This was an enemy of Rome, and around this time period, these were not biblical Egyptians running around here. It's not what I'm talking about. This is basically where Cleopatra's from, right? So Cleopatra, although she did speak Egyptian and the Egyptians did love her for it, she wasn't a pure, an Egyptian woman. Sorry to get the controversy out of the way, but there was this leader called Cato, and once he had a meeting with a Ptolemaic king, king of Egypt. This is the king of Egypt, and he had such a disdain and disrespect for Egyptians because they were. Remember earlier we were talking about disgusting, kind of immoral, a lot of more fat, cross-dressing, feminine, whatever. Cato was a traditional Roman conservative, and the king of Egypt was seen as that. He was grossly overweight. They thought the Egyptians were disgusting. This is what I'm saying when I say that these Egyptians were not the Egyptians we know and love. These were, this was a couple thousand years after that. Anyway, he has a meeting with him, and he has some business to do. So he tells the Egyptian king, "Come over here," and he walks into his bathroom, what would be called the bathroom, and has the Egyptian king, settle in. And he sits down to take a shit while having the meeting with the Ptolemaic king.
That's incredible. That's incredible confidence.
Yeah, not only was he the man, but he had such a disgust for Egyptians. And this kind of got my antennas going. And do you ever remember LBJ doing that?
Yeah.
He would invite the press into his bathroom and do interviews while taking shits.
I did not know that. No, I didn't know that.
LBJ is a freak.
You could even type it in. LBJ is taking a shit while talking to the press.
I will Google that.
I thought this was pretty funny because I wonder, I don't know, obviously no one that I know knew the man. I wonder if he had that disdain for the press or he was just fascinated by Rome that he said, you know what, come into my bathroom while I shit and I'll do this interview for you. And he gave the interview while shitting. I wonder if that was something he took from Cato.
Yeah.
I had a boss who did something like that once. I was summoned to his office and there was all the top people in the company and he was yelling down the hall and I could hear his belt rustling and stuff. And I was like, I think he's taking a shit right now while he yells out what he wants them to do. And I remember thinking like, this is the most, like, not even to look at the world in like the alpha beta way, but I was like, that's the most alpha shit I've ever experienced in my life was that. So, and trust me, this guy was not a scholar. I think maybe it's just a personality type of like, I know that it's gross when people shit, but
he's not even, he can't even give himself 5 minutes of silence to take a dump. Like he's just got to be screaming things at all times.
I thought that was pretty funny.
I'm going to do that at some point. I'm keeping that in my back pocket. I might not even really shit. I might just pretend.
You just want them to feel.
Because what if I want to shit in front of that person, but I don't have to go?
I mean, dude, that is like power, though. Like you have to sit here while I take a shit, and there's nothing you can do about. That's why I think Dave and I have talked about this before in the past, like in animal kingdoms and stuff like that. Like true alphas don't really last that long because you kind of start to get tired of taking their shit all the time, and you kind of want to get you and the boys riled up and go take them out. Because of that, because, you know, people can only take so much disrespect, basically.
And also it doesn't take but a couple betas to take out one alpha.
Like Julius Caesar, full circle, a bunch of betas stabbed him.
Yeah, gathered round and all took a stab. They were all distraught by it. Even some of the ones that stabbed him could not believe they had done it. And this really actually, again, it's coming to me now. There were many people, they were at a theater. I can't remember whose theater it was. I believe it was Pompey, the general, the very rich general. I could be wrong. Someone's going to bitch about it online because they don't have a life, but they gathered around him and stabbed him. And they were said to be distraught at his burial. They didn't bury him, but they laid him out on a marble couch, I believe. And they all took turns just looking over him. And it was said that even some that were stabbing were actually upset. And now you can tell because I've completely lagged out and I'm talking slow because I'm observing the mob mentality that we have today, where it's a dogpiling. It's everyone jumps on and they get captured by it could be in person. It could be at a demonstration, a protest, a group, a mob, a herd, whatever you want to call it, a tribe, whatever, or it could be in digital. It could be online. They get this confidence in this one-upsmanship. And you see it in gangs too. I grew up in gangs my whole life. So it's always like, who's the baddest dude? Oh, he did that. Well, I'll do this type of thing. Yeah. It's mob mentality. Get the mob going crazy. And they slash Julius Caesar apart. And then they cry about it afterward as if their hand wasn't the one that pushed the knife on him.
I got a friend who's a firefighter, and he said that, you know, one of the things that they are taught, I've heard this in multiple different places too, is if someone's, you know, on a building and they're going to jump, is that they don't allow crowds near because
other people will.
So many, no. So many people. There's been multiple times where people in the crowd have started to yell "jump" and have yelled for the person to jump, and then afterwards, when they're asked about it, they feel guilty. Like, oh, I just got caught up. I was late to work, and I was mad that this guy was standing there, and so I just started yelling "jump." And then afterwards, they almost all feel bad individually.
That's a scenario where I wouldn't even trust the defense of the person. You know, that's kind of a causation and correlation thing where I wouldn't even believe, you know, maybe perhaps he was late for work and maybe whatever, but I think that's almost an instinctive shout.
Yeah.
And he could point to a bunch of justifications about how shitty his life is. I'm late for work. The old lady hates me. Da 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 da. I got these kids. I've got these annoyeds. I just told this guy to jump, but he's just talking about a shitty life. I don't know. Garner sympathy for the fact that he just encouraged someone to jump. I think it might be a little bit more mammalian, reptilian brain, lower on the scale of just straight instinctual impulse.
Yeah.
I think people yell jump because they want to see a motherfucker jump.
Yeah, they want to see if a body will bounce when it hits the cement.
And who wants to say that though? Why'd you tell this guy to jump? I wanted to see him jump. Who says that? Only. It's funny that we've changed the definition now, but I was going to say only a psychopath would say that, and I would mean it literally, because the definition of a psychopath used to be a man who lacks a conscience. So a person that would say that wouldn't consider how the other person that he was answering to viewed him. We don't say psychopath anymore. Now we say antisocial or whatever. Yeah, I believe that he would just want to see him jump.
Speaking of, like with Julius Caesar being killed and then the people feeling bad about it afterwards, and maybe tying into gang life, I don't know. Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever been or heard of it?
Yes, more times than not.
Really?
Especially when you have people killing people they love, family members, stuff like that. I mean, my family's so fucking whacked out, they kill each other. So.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up. David, thanks again for being on the show. And by the way, if you're a fan of David and his music, please subscribe, because we'll see more of him in the future. That's the plan. And I think we're going to do some really cool content together, collaborating with David on this. So please stay tuned. Before we really go, though, we always try to do a bit of an art challenge with each episode. So obviously the art challenge today is we want to see some sort of drawing, some sort of art sent to us on our socials that do ancient Rome. And I tell you what, if you can draw David as like an emperor or a gladiator or something, some kind of ancient Rome tie-in, you may win the prize for the week. So would you send out a signed CD for the winner?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want.
Awesome. That's badass. All right. Winner of the art challenge gets a signed CD from David. So
next time we talk too, then we'll hop on
Yeah.
Kissinger.
Kissinger's going down.
All right. Well, that's it for today.